Even though you had a stupid people die in scary movies, does everybody wanna grow wings and fly away? Get a restart, go back to saying our hellos and having fun. Filler words. See me smile. Damn, you're dead.
And that's a clip of some of the silly and unfinished songs I wrote in 3 months. Stupid people die in scary movies? What kind of a line is that anyway? It's clunky, it's awkward, and it's too silly to be a real song. If you told me a year ago that I would enjoy sharing all my imperfect creations, I would have called you crazy. You see, for years, I was held captive, not by a person or a pack of wild beasts, but by an obsession with perfection. Perfection. The condition, state, or quality of being free of any flaws or defects. Sounds like a good thing, right? Well, I'm here to share my story of how it crippled me, my relationships, and my creativity. Let me set the stage. 8th grade grammar class with Mrs. Mack. I sat down, opened my book, and the pencil in my hand began to shake. We were given one direction for completing the sentences on page 93. Be creative. But being creative meant making mistakes. And making mistakes was the sign of a failure. So why try at all? In my academics, in my leadership roles, and in almost every part of my life, I strive for excellence. But whenever I was unsure, or the end result wasn't just in my line of sight, my feeling of safety was challenged. So I gave up. After class, I remember running downstairs, locking myself in a bathroom stall, and sobbing. What was the mindset that kept me from any new experience? I believed with every ounce of my being that my self-worth was in how perfect I could be. My unreachable standards were a recipe for failure, because I soon learned that if you put too much pressure on every attempt at perfection, you've already failed before you've started. But how can perfectionism be bad? Research has shown that obsessive perfectionism is linked to depression, anxiety, and even thoughts of suicide. And I think award-winning psychiatrist David Burns puts it well when he states that perfectionists are, quote, those whose standards are high beyond reach, people who strain toward impossible goals and measure their own self-worth by their accomplishments. For these people, the effort for excellence is self-defeating. I've been a musician since I was 14. My mother introduced me to the baritone ukulele, and I remember singing on stage for the very first time. Since then, I've gotten to perform at places close to my heart, like Dayton's 2nd Street Market, and even on the Phrase Pavilion stage. I loved being recognized as a singer, but I couldn't help but want that second word to my title, songwriter. However, it was easy to play covers of Adele at an open mic night. It was comfortable. That small word, comfortable, is deceiving. It kept me in a cage I didn't know I was in. Eventually, songwriting became my biggest fear. When you see a friend do something truly amazing, don't you think that person is just a prodigy? I did. And although I desired to see others as inspirations, they became threats. And instead of celebrating the accomplishments of my friends and family, envy and resentment took its place. It took me a long time to realize that someone else's success is not my failure. I read once that we compare other people's highlight reels to our behind the scenes. Who knew being challenged to embrace my behind the scenes would turn my fear of failure into an imperfect mess of joy? Last year, I was offered a record deal with Invention City Records. My producer and I sat down, and he said the most terrifying sentence. I want you to write a song every day for 90 days. My brain had just about exploded. I had barely written anything. But at that moment, I was faced with two options: stay in the comfortable cage of perfection or break free. So I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No problem." I drove to the store, picked up a blue notebook, and began that very day. As I look back on those 3 months, I realized that if I had waited a single day longer, I would have never committed, and I wouldn't be sharing my story with you. The first page read 6/13/18 with a list of objectives. I wanted to be held accountable, so I made it a priority to post a snippet of each song on my Instagram story every day. The first day was one of the hardest. Not only was I unsure of myself, but I was broadcasting it on social media for all to see. Some songs left me feeling childish and embarrassed, and that inevitable question kept nudging me. What will they think of me? But soon, songwriting became routine, and the ties between my self-worth and my creations began to loosen. I felt free to write about everything. During my 90-day challenge, people would message me, people I had never even talked to, saying that their hold on perfection was stifling them, not only from their creativity, but from their everyday lives. I shared with them that challenging myself didn't stop in my music life. I cared less of what other people thought of me, and I was kinder to myself. And it may always be a struggle. Even while I wrote this, I had to remind myself of the lessons I had learned. But as the pressure of perfection faded, my creativity began to flourish. I developed a healthy relationship with my mistakes, and I realized that the world isn't filled with perfect prodigies. It's filled with people who try, fail, and try again. So go out and embrace your behind the scenes. Thank you.